Welcome to Rethinking Parenting. My name is Christina Young, and I teach parents of teenagers. Join me here on Fridays to learn practical tools, strategies, and scripts designed to help you manage the challenges of raising teens in today's complex world. Welcome back to Rethinking Parenting with Christina Young. I'm here on video for the first time. Hallelujah. Finally getting in the swing of things here. I'm very excited to talk to you today about that show that a lot of you, I think, have watched on Netflix called Adolescence. So my bigger topic is sort of some observations about our young men. But I'm wondering how many of you have actually watched that. It was a 4-part miniseries, and it's brutal. It's eye-opening. It's so well written, well acted, beautifully shot. Each episode is one continuous shot, which is incredible. Like, I don't know how they did that. Anyway, I want to read you quickly the summary of this show just to kind of get everybody up to speed. And I'm not revealing anything if you haven't decided to watch this show yet. So the show is called Adolescence. It is set in an English town where armed police raid a family home and arrest this 13-year-old boy named Jamie Miller on suspicion of the murder of his classmate, Katie Leonard. Jamie is processed and held at a police station for questioning and then remanded in custody at a secure training center. Investigations at Jamie's school and interviews by a forensic psychologist uncover Jamie's views towards women associated with this thing called manosphere and bullying, and he's been bullied on social media. We also get a glimpse of his home life where Jamie's family deals with the community's backlash against them as they work together to cope with Jamie's arrest and subsequent detention. Okay, so that's just a brief summary for you so you kind of know what's going on. If you haven't watched the show, you might want to go watch it and then listen to this episode. But then again, a lot of my comments in this episode are sort of more global comments based on my years of working with parents. You decide. So I've read some commentary about the show. I've talked to my friends and family about the show. I personally found it deeply, deeply moving and also incredibly difficult to watch. I've had my private practice for a total of 13 years now, always with the goal of helping adults learn how to parent their teens better. So my hope in this episode is to connect some dots for you, my listener, that might shed some light on how you can parent your teenagers better. All informed by, obviously, my experience working with families, but also the ways in which this show, Adolescence, helped me connect some dots. So here's the truth. In all 13 years of having my private practice, one thing has been very consistent and concerning. More parents of boys contact me than parents of girls. Always. Whether my work with those parents has been on Zoom, in person, in Connecticut, in Florida, public school, private school, parochial school. Just ask my husband. Not that I'm blowing up anybody's confidences, but I will sometimes say to him, my God, I've now worked with a set of parents of a 7th boy in a row. What's the deal? And if you ask him over all these years, it's always me commenting, why am I working with all these parents of boys? It's fascinating. So that's why this show really, really resonated with me. I think the show Adolescence did a superb job of diving into that deep pool of disturbed water to expose some of the pain and suffering our young men grapple with. For starters, this is something I've always observed. Our girls tend to be afforded this very wide, large array of options for who they might want to be. They're allowed to try on so many different identities reasonably safely. They can practice figuring out who they want to align themselves with. Let me give you some examples. As a girl in our culture, you have all these options. You can be the super smart, nerdy girl who studies a lot and takes all the AP classes. You can be an artsy, eclectic, creative girl who dabbles in all sorts of different outlets to express herself. You can be the athletic, fit, competitive, love team sports girl. You can be the super emo girl who wears all black clothing, black eyeliner, lots of piercings, listens to goth music. You can be the ballerina girl who aspires to be on stage, wears a lot of pink, and is constantly practicing in the dance studio with her leg warmers. You can be the musician girl who plays lots of instruments, is in a couple bands, puts music up on Spotify from a young age. You get the idea. You can be the debate club girl, the chess club girl, the STEM girl who lives in the 3D makers lab. You can be the science girl who loves lab day and mixing chemicals and dreams of being a doctor or a chemist. You can be the religious girl who organizes an on campus club to support whatever religion you are and offers prayers at lunchtime. You can be the aspiring writer girl with big feelings who heads up the school magazine and is friends with the English teacher. Okay, that was a million examples, but I'm trying to make a point here. Okay, all of those are not going to be an easy path, but girls have all of these options, all of these different identities that they can try on without too many ramifications. Let's take a look at boys on the other hand. Okay, for starters, there's the alpha athletic sports guy who loves to lift weights. He's competitive. He doesn't mind being yelled at by the coach. And he feels so much camaraderie for being on the team. And really, his whole life is about sports. He plays sports, he watches sports. Very likely, he's gambling on sports. Okay, next, there's the nerdy academic guy who is very likely ostracized by the alpha athletic guys. Okay. Then there's the artsy, creative music guy who might be vaguely liked by other guys, but he can't catch a ball whatsoever. He has no athletic bone in his body. So, very likely he's ostracized as well by the jocks. Then there's the computer tech coder, game dev guy who's really, really smart, but maybe a little socially awkward, definitely ostracized by the jocks. Maybe there's the rock band guy who just wants to practice with his band all the time. But guess what? He's probably not great at sports. So he too is ostracized by the jocks. Are there debate club boys? Are there chess club boys? Yes. Model UN boys? Yes. But do they feel included and accepted and revered in their school setting? Very unlikely. They're not alphas at their school because they don't uphold this masculine, tough guy, athletic, cocky persona thing. What about the deeply feeling writer boy, kind of the equivalent of that girl who loves poetry? He loves hanging out with the English teacher. He hopes to run the school magazine. Is he accepted, revered? No, very unlikely. Guys have fewer options than girls. If they don't fall into that very first athletic category, things can get very tricky for them very quickly, especially in middle school, where they are all quietly attempting to establish this pecking order without ever having the cognitive sophistication to speak aloud about the unwritten rules and laws of this pecking order. Think about Lord of the Flies. It's a perfect example. This is most likely why many more parents of boys have landed in my practice than parents of girls. Our culture is just not great at accepting this wide swath of boys. I don't know if this is still related to homophobia or something else. Unfortunately, there still seem to be a lot of boys online, especially middle school age boys, calling each other a faggot, calling each other gay. There's still a fear, for sure, of being thrown into this other category. Boys who miss an important throw, let's say they're on the field, they're on the court, there's a big audience, they might get laughed at. Other boys might call them still those words, faggot or gay, idiot. These boys are mocked endlessly. And here's the thing, where do those feelings go? What do our boys do with those feelings? Every human, regardless of their gender, would feel humiliated to drop an important ball that might help the team win the game, especially if there's a large audience watching, and God forbid there's girls in the audience. Girls are given permission to cry by our society for the most part. Boys are just not. Okay, more on that, but I just want to go back for a second to this show called Adolescence. So, should you watch this show with your teenager? I think you should, but I think you should watch it first yourself so you know what you're getting into. It is intense, huge topics, big, big topics. And if your family's not in the habit of discussing huge topics, you might want to watch it yourself. Maybe you watch it with your partner and the two of you have a conversation first. Here's what I'd love for you to say to your teen. Hey, there's this show, you might have heard of it. It's called Adolescence. It's this incredible depiction of real life stressors and situations. And here's what's really important. I would love for you to say to your teen, well, first of all, ask them, do you want to watch it with me? You want to watch it with your friends? You want to watch it alone? You want to watch it with dad? Whatever. It doesn't matter to me. But what does matter to me is that we have a conversation after you watch it because I really want to know your opinion. Okay. Every time that we can build up our teens by asking their opinion on something, please do it. I want to digress for a moment into a conversation about this book, amazing book that we just used in my parenting groups. It's called 10 to 25, The Science of Motivating Young People. It's by a guy named David Yeager, and it's fascinating. It's super dense. I can't recommend that you read it cover to cover. Maybe listen to it on Audible. But the biggest takeaway that I wanted my parents to know, the ones that I work with, is this. He suggests that the greatest motivator for teens is the quest for status, respect, and prestige. Again, his book is not at all light reading, but I did love reading it myself just because I knew it was going to provide me with some excellent teachable nuggets that I could share with the parents that I work with. So knowing that kids really tune into things that provide them with status, prestige, and respect as soon as puberty kicks in is a very helpful piece of information for parents. Because when kids feel respected by the adults around them, teachers, coaches, parents, they are more motivated to work. So immediately makes me think of my son in sixth grade. He had a science teacher who probably should have retired years prior to teaching him. On day one, she lost my son. He came home and his report was, she doesn't care about us at all. She totally disrespected us. It's a very cookie cutter science class where every year the kids make the exact same science projects with no ingenuity, no creativity. My son was done on day one. She never regained his desire to work. He was never motivated to work because he perceived her as disrespectful and dismissive. And this is exactly what Yeager's talking about in his book. So I want you to look for ways that you can authentically ask for your kids' opinion on things. So how do you do that? Watch a meme together, watch a clip from the news together. Ask your kids, what did you think of that? What did you make of that? Duct tape your own mouth shut, please. It's so tempting to offer our opinion. But the whole point of this is saying, what did you make of that? I'm so curious to know your opinion. Why? Because it builds your kids up and it tells your kids that you respect them. Another example, let's say you all attend a barbecue together or a church function together or somebody's birthday party together. Ask your kids when you come home, oh, what did you think of our new neighbor's wife or husband? Before you insert your own opinion, ask them what they thought. Hold your observations. Let your kids talk and then respond authentically. Either you agree or you don't agree, tell them. But let them know their opinion is interesting to you. Instilling this kind of respect is what ultimately is going to give you traction with your kid. Here's what I mean. If your kids feel like you are genuinely, authentically interested in them, curious about their observations and their opinions, they're going to be more likely to cooperate. There's a big linkage there between how much they feel respected and how willing they are to cooperate. So there's great research to prove this in Yeager's book, but my own life experiences with my kids and helping families with kids has proven this left and right. And I'm sure you've already seen the same thing yourself. Okay, huge digression, but it's important to chat about what motivates teens. But I want to return to why I think you and your teenagers should watch Adolescence. Again, together or separately, doesn't matter. Adolescence does a beautiful job of showing us how fragile our boys are, especially boys whose dads are not terribly evolved yet in terms of being emotionally available, in terms of being well regulated. The boy in the show is called Jamie, and Jamie's dad was certainly, he was better off than his own dad. Let's say that. He was a more evolved version of a man than his own father, but he still has a ways to go. Here's the thing though. Jamie learned from his somewhat emotionally stunted dad that when you have big explosive feelings, you act them out physically. You tantrum, you yell, you throw things. Instead of figuring out a way to say your feelings, to talk about your anger. So we learn that a combination of factors in the show, Adolescence, contributed to Jamie's actions. He killed someone, including his lack of self-esteem, his perceived bullying at school, and his access to what's called online incel propaganda. All new to me. I did not know what any of this was. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting into it. It's not the point of this particular episode. But what I do want you to realize is that when Katie, who is a 13-year-old girl that Jamie ultimately killed, when Katie publicly accuses Jamie online of being an incel, he becomes embarrassed and enraged. And then the stabbing occurs soon after. I hope I'm not revealing too much. It's all online though, so I think you might have already heard and seen all of this. Here's the heartbreaking commentary that I read about Jamie and his never-ending desire to please his own dad. And it really resonated with me because it made me think about the dads I've worked with and the way they talked about their sons' never-ending desire to please them. Here's what it said. Jamie is always trying to impress his dad and make sure his dad is proud of him. But I don't think he finds that. He's obviously bothered about the plea, but he's more bothered about his dad. Although he doesn't want to let down his whole family, his dad is at the core of his heart. Jamie does not want to let his dad down. And we see that over and over again through the 4 episodes. That's what he's preoccupied with. Much more, actually, than being preoccupied with having murdered a peer. It's fascinating. Again, this show resonated with me so deeply because of the front seat that I've had to so many of these families where an emotionally immature father is trying to raise a boy in the 2020s. Everything is so unclear to our boys these days. So I want to talk for a moment about what it means to be a young man now, especially post-COVID, when so many adolescents have struggled with loneliness, anxiety, depression, and also especially when we as a culture post-COVID have finally decided to allow for some more wiggle room around mental health. A little bit of the stigma has been removed. We've finally normalized some more affordable platforms like BetterHelp to allow more people to have access to therapy. But here's the thing. What if you're a boy, let's say 12, 13, 14-year-old middle school boy, now in 2025, and you're longing for your dad's approval. The thing is, your dad was likely raised in late 70s, 80s, maybe 90s, pre-pandemic, when quote unquote men were men and things weren't so soft and fluffy, and all of this talking about mental health and feelings was not yet normalized. These dads' values and sort of operating instructions look very different than what our boys are hearing about now in 2025. There's a gap here. So it seems to me that young men today have so much confusion about their roles, about what it means to be a young man. This show, Adolescence, offers an opportunity for kids and parents to dive into some of the difficult conversations. That's what I like about it. That's why I wanted to talk about it on this podcast. To me, if we're talking about that bigger, huge, my title of my podcast, Rethinking Parenting, it's how do we get access? What are the ways that we can get into kids' brains? And I see this as the most unbelievable ticket into your adolescent's brain. And I don't want you to miss that opportunity. There's so many difficult conversations that live within this show. Conversations about social media use, about the importance of finding ways to communicate about big feelings, about figuring out how to regulate yourself and your emotions. They're really important topics, especially for dads and boys. My clients and all the people in my groups know I talk a lot about 99% of parenting is about the adult. And I hate to say, but this show really confirms that truth for me. In the final scene of Adolescence, which is just terribly heartbreaking, we see Jamie's dad on his empty bed, and he's holding Jamie's teddy bear. Jamie has just told his dad that he's going to plead guilty. There's been enough time that has passed in the show and in Jamie's maturation process where he's come to grips with the fact that he's guilty of this crime. And he's realized sort of more of the gravity of what he's done to another human being. But what I thought was particularly brilliant about this scene, but also the scenes leading up to this scene, was that the show never intentionally provided any kind of an easy scapegoat here. They did not depict an alcoholic dad or a physically abusive dad or a drug addicted wife. There wasn't a cheating spouse, none of that. The parents were not perfect, definitely not perfect, but they were hardworking. They showed up for their kids. We haven't even talked about the daughter, the Jamie's sister, and how remarkably high functioning she was. So the show did a great job of not allowing for any kind of easy scapegoat. So where does that leave us as consumers of this show? My takeaway that I want to offer in this episode is this, and it's kind of the same one I often arrive at, especially in my work with all of these parents of young men. I want you to try for transparency as often as possible. What do I mean by that? I mean, see how regularly you can talk about your feelings, about being vulnerable, about making mistakes, about messing things up. But here's the thing. We as women, as moms, tend to do that more easily. So what I want, if you're a mom listening to this, is I want you to take the risk of talking to your spouse, your partner, your husband. And I want you to take the risk of either having him listen to this episode of my podcast or ask him to watch Adolescence with you and see if the two of you together can land on this notion of, hey, especially for our sons, we got to talk more. We got to teach them how to admit their failures, how to talk about mistakes and mishaps where they might feel that whole range of feelings. And how do we help them name those feelings? Being sad, being humiliated, being ashamed, being angry, being confused, frustrated. So many of our boys don't have this kind of language. Everything gets lumped into one category, which is anger. It's more of a socially accepted feeling than something like shame or humiliation. And so it's what a lot of men in families tend to display. They display angry feelings, and they don't get into the more nuanced feelings of shame or humiliation or betrayal or, God forbid, being ostracized as a middle school kid, which is so painful. In your home, see if you can make a dent. I'm not asking men to make huge changes in their workplace. I know that's hard. But in your home, would it be possible for you to make a dent, make a small shift in the way that you talk about feelings so that you're modeling more of this accountability, more of this having feelings for your sons? Men are the best role models. They really are, because women do it more naturally. I know I already said this, but men are already the dads in the family, and they have so many contact hours with their sons. So many. And if they could be intentional about how do I want to behave during a small fraction of those contact hours, maybe I want to help shape and teach my son about how to have feelings, how to talk about feelings. I know it's a super lofty goal. Okay, and P.S., we did not even get into at all this incel culture. We didn't even talk about the fact that Katie, the girl in the show, did the bullying. She was far from perfect. But I want to point out a quick difference. She humiliated Jamie, yes. But here's the thing. If someone had humiliated her, it is very, very likely that she would have talked about it. Girls emote. Girls talk about their feelings, whether it's with their friends, their mom, their sister, somebody. Girls tend to emote. And the truth is that boys tend to distract themselves when they're having big feelings, which ultimately leads to them hiding their feelings, pushing their feelings down. If we pull the lens really wide right now, this is why women tend to live longer than men, right? We all know that feelings that we stuff down turn into, quite often, really big health problems. And girls and women tend to emote, and boys and men tend to distract themselves first from those big feelings and then push them down, hide them. Okay. This is an exhausting episode because I care really deeply about this stuff. And I've seen it go on for so long in my practice, and then to see it on screen depicted in this brilliant show called Adolescence, it really resonated with me. I really hate the idea of our young men suffering silently, ill-equipped to air their thoughts and their feelings for fear of being called gay or being called a sissy or being called a baby with big feelings. It just breaks my heart. Our world would be so much of a better place if our men could model for our young men how to feel deeply. Not all the time. Not all the time. I don't need that. We don't need that. But just once in a while, it would be an incredible change. Thanks for listening. I hope this episode might inspire you to watch the show, to have a talk with your kids who might have watched that show, or perhaps even have a talk with the men in your life. Maybe it's not just your husband. Maybe it's your brother. Maybe it's your dad. Maybe it's your cousin who has little kids and is raising a family. See if you might feel motivated to have a talk with your men in your life about what they may or may not be modeling for the younger generation of men. Thanks so much. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Rethinking Parenting. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to rate, follow, and subscribe. I read all of your comments, feedback, and suggestions, and I so appreciate them. So keep sending them in. Thank you.